Jake had been counting down the days to this particular Saturday morning like a kid waiting for summer vacation. You know that feeling when you've been working so hard that even your dreams are about spreadsheets and customer complaints? That was exactly where Jake was at. He'd been pulling extra shifts at the downtown restaurant for 3 weeks straight, covering for sick coworkers and handling the holiday rush. His feet hurt, his back ached, and all he wanted was one thing, just one simple thing: to sleep past sunrise without an alarm clock screaming in his ear. Friday night, he made all the necessary preparations. Phone on silent? Check. Notifications turned off? Double check. Blackout curtains pulled so tight that not even a sliver of sunlight could sneak through? Triple check. He even put a sign on the bedroom door that read, "Do not disturb unless the house is actually on fire." He thought he'd covered all his bases. He flopped into bed around midnight, and within minutes, he was out cold. Already dreaming about sleeping until at least 11 in the morning. Maybe even noon, if the universe was feeling generous. But here's the thing about making plans. Life has this funny way of laughing at them, and in Jake's case, life came in the form of his girlfriend, Amy. Now, Amy was wonderful in about 1,000 different ways. She was kind, funny, supportive, and made the best homemade pizza he'd ever tasted. But she had one tiny quirk that drove Jake absolutely bonkers. The woman could not, would not, and seemingly was physically unable to sleep past 6:30 in the morning. It didn't matter if they'd been out until 2 in the morning. It didn't matter if it was a holiday, a weekend, or if the world outside was covered in 3 feet of snow. Come 6:30, Amy's eyes would pop open like someone had flipped a switch, and she'd be ready to start her day. Jake had heard her explanations before. Something about her body clock being permanently set to early morning mode since she was a child. Her parents used to joke that she was solar-powered and couldn't function without seeing the sunrise. Amy had tried to warn him several times that sleeping in wasn't really her thing, but Jake always thought she was exaggerating. I mean, who can't sleep in on a Saturday? Everyone loves sleeping in on Saturday. That's basically the whole point of weekends existing in the first place. Saturday morning arrived, and at exactly 7:15, Jake was completely dead to the world. He wasn't just sleeping. He was in that deep, wonderful, dream-filled zone where everything feels perfect. In his dream, he was on a beach somewhere tropical, lying in a hammock with absolutely nothing to do and nowhere to be. The sun was warm, the breeze was cool, and someone was bringing him fresh coconut water. It was paradise. Real-life paradise was about to come crashing down, but Dream Jake had no idea what was coming. Meanwhile, in the actual apartment, Amy had been awake since 6:30 on the dot. Just like clockwork. She'd already gone through her usual morning routine, checked her phone for messages, scrolled through social media for 20 minutes, done her entire skincare routine with all 7 products she swore were absolutely necessary, and made herself a cup of coffee. She'd even done a load of laundry and organized the kitchen counter. Now it was 7:15, and she was bored. Not just a little bored. Extremely. Incredibly. Pull your hair out kind of bored. She looked around the quiet apartment, then her eyes landed on the bedroom door. Behind that door was Jake, probably still snoring away without a care in the world. Amy stood there for a moment, coffee cup in hand, having an internal debate. Should she let him sleep? He had been working really hard lately. He definitely deserved the rest. On the other hand, they had the whole day together, and she had so many ideas for fun things they could do. Plus, sleeping until noon seemed excessive, right? He'd already gotten 7 hours of sleep. That was plenty. Most people functioned just fine on 7 hours. She convinced herself that she'd actually be doing him a favor by waking him up. After all, who wants to waste a beautiful Saturday sleeping? She definitely wasn't thinking about how utterly hilarious it would be to mess with him a little bit. Definitely not. Amy tiptoed toward the bedroom, trying to be sneaky even though there was no real reason to be quiet anymore, since her whole plan was to wake Jake up anyway. She slowly turned the doorknob and peeked inside. There he was, completely sprawled out across the bed like a starfish, one arm hanging off the side, mouth slightly open, snoring softly. He looked so peaceful, so completely unaware of what was about to happen. Amy almost felt bad about what she was planning. Almost, but not quite enough to actually stop. Her first attempt was what she called the accidental noise method. She walked back into the living room and picked up her phone. Then, standing right outside the bedroom door, she let it slip from her fingers. The phone hit the hardwood floor with a solid thunk that echoed through the apartment. Amy waited, listening carefully for any signs of movement from the bedroom. Nothing. Not even a change in his breathing pattern. The man was sleeping like he'd been knocked out. She was actually kind of impressed by his ability to sleep through that. Most people would at least stir a little bit. Fine, she thought. Time to turn up the volume a bit. Amy walked over to the dresser in the hallway and started opening and closing drawers. First quietly, then with a bit more enthusiasm. She pulled out a drawer, shuffled some things around, and pushed it closed with just enough force to make a decent bang. Still nothing from the bedroom. Was he even breathing? She leaned closer to the door to check. Yep. Still snoring. This was getting ridiculous. Amy decided to move operations to the kitchen. If random noises wouldn't work, maybe the smell of breakfast would do the trick. She pulled out a frying pan and set it on the stove with more force than necessary. The metal clanged loudly. She turned on the exhaust fan, opened and closed cabinet doors, and got out ingredients for pancakes. The flour bag made a nice thud on the counter. She cracked eggs with extra enthusiasm. She even turned on the blender to make a smoothie, and that thing sounded like a small airplane taking off in their kitchen. Surely that would wake him up. Amy paused the blender and listened. The apartment fell silent, except for the humming of the refrigerator, and from the bedroom, the steady sound of snoring continued, completely undisturbed. She couldn't believe it. Was this guy in a coma? How could anyone sleep through a blender going full speed 10 feet away from their head? Amy stood in the kitchen, hands on her hips, staring in the direction of the bedroom. She was impressed, annoyed, and amused all at the same time. Jake had somehow developed supernatural sleeping powers that she didn't know about. This was a man who could apparently sleep through anything. A marching band could probably parade through the apartment, and he'd just roll over and keep dreaming. But Amy wasn't the type to give up easily. If anything, this was now a challenge. A mission. She'd been trying the gentle approach. The subtle hints that morning had arrived and it was time to join the land of the living. Clearly, subtle wasn't going to cut it with this guy. It was time to get creative. Time to pull out the big moves. Amy's mind started racing with possibilities. Each idea more ridiculous than the last. She remembered reading somewhere that people can sense when they're being watched, even in their sleep. Something about primitive survival instincts from back when humans had to worry about predators sneaking up on them. Maybe that would work? It was worth a shot. Amy crept back into the bedroom as quietly as possible. She approached the bed and positioned herself right next to where Jake's head was resting on the pillow. Then she just stood there, leaning down, staring directly at his sleeping face from about 6 inches away. She watched his eyelids for any flutter of movement. She studied his face for any sign that his subconscious was picking up on her presence. 1 minute passed. Then 2. Amy's back started to hurt from bending over. But she committed to the experiment. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only 3 minutes, Jake's eye twitched. Just a tiny little twitch. Amy's heart jumped with excitement. Was it working? Was he waking up? Jake's hand moved slightly, swatting at the air near his face like he was brushing away a fly. Then he rolled over to his other side, gave a deep sigh, and continued sleeping. Amy straightened up, rubbing her lower back. Unbelievable. Amy wasn't about to admit defeat, though. Not by a long shot. She'd come too far, and invested too much effort into this mission to give up now. If watching him sleep wasn't going to work, then it was time for some physical intervention. Nothing mean or cruel, just a gentle nudge to help him realize that he'd had plenty of rest and it was time to start the day. She reached out and poked his shoulder. Just once. Softly. Jake didn't react. She poked again. this time with a bit more purpose. His shoulder moved slightly under her finger. But that was it. No eye-opening, no groaning. Nothing that indicated he was anywhere close to waking up. Amy escalated her poking campaign. She moved from his shoulder to his arm, giving him a series of light pokes. Nothing. She poked his back. Still nothing. She gently poked his cheek, which just made his face scrunch up for a second before relaxing again. This was getting silly now, but Amy was determined. She poked his nose, which resulted in him wrinkling his face like a bunny. She couldn't help but giggle at that. Even in his sleep, he looked ridiculous. She started drawing invisible patterns on his face with her finger, tracing imaginary mustaches and beards. At one point, Jake's hand came up and swatted at his face like he was fighting off a mosquito. But his eyes stayed firmly shut. Time for a new strategy. Amy leaned close to his ear and started whispering. Not loudly. Just soft little comments that she thought might penetrate his sleeping brain and trigger some kind of response. She started with his name. Jake. Hey. Jake. Time to wake up, Jake. Nothing. She tried being more specific. Jake. I think I left the stove on. No reaction. Jake, there's a spider on the ceiling right above your face. His nose twitched, but his eyes stayed closed. Jake. I accidentally ordered 47 pizzas on your credit card and they're all being delivered in 10 minutes. She had to cover her mouth to keep from laughing out loud at that one. But still, he didn't wake up. Amy sat back on her heels, completely baffled. How was this possible? She'd tried noise, smells, staring, poking, and whispering. What else was there? Then she remembered. They were dog-sitting this weekend for their neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who lived down the hall. Bella, the golden retriever, the extremely energetic, always excited, never calm for even a second golden retriever who had been surprisingly patient in the living room all morning. Amy's eyes lit up. Oh, this was going to be perfect. This was going to be absolutely perfect. She tiptoed out of the bedroom, closing the door quietly behind her. In the living room, Bella was lying on her dog bed, but the moment she saw Amy, her tail started wagging so hard that her entire back half was wiggling. Bella loved people. She loved playing. She loved attention. And she especially loved jumping on beds, which Mrs. Chen had mentioned was a bad habit they'd been trying to break her of. Well, Amy thought, sometimes bad habits come in handy. She walked over to Bella and knelt down, scratching behind the dog's ears. Bella's tail went into overdrive, whacking against the floor like a furry helicopter blade. Hey girl, Amy whispered. Want to go see Jake? Want to go wake him up? At the sound of Jake's name, Bella's ears perked up. She knew Jake. Jake gave good belly rubs. Jake sometimes snuck her treats when he thought nobody was looking. Bella was very interested in visiting Jake. Amy stood up and walked toward the bedroom, and Bella immediately jumped to her feet, trotting along behind her. This was it. The final plan. The one that absolutely could not fail. Amy put her hand on the bedroom doorknob and looked down at Bella, who was practically vibrating with excitement. The dog had no idea she was about to become part of the greatest wake-up call in history. Amy took a deep breath, pulled out her phone with her free hand and opened the camera app. This needed to be recorded. Their friends would never believe it otherwise. She hit the record button, then slowly opened the bedroom door. What happened next was like watching a furry golden missile launch itself into space. The second that door opened wide enough for Bella to fit through, she exploded into the room. There was no other word for it. 65 pounds of pure dog excitement went from 0 to maximum velocity in about half a second. Bella had spotted the bed, and more importantly, she'd spotted the Jake-shaped lump under the covers. In her doggy brain, this was the best game ever. Human in bed equals perfect target for morning playtime. Jake's peaceful dream about tropical beaches and hammocks ended in the most abrupt way possible. 1 second he was in paradise. The next second, he felt like a truck had driven over his stomach. His eyes flew open in complete shock and confusion. The first thing he saw was fur. Golden fur. Lots of it. Then he saw a face. A very happy dog face with a tongue hanging out, coming directly toward his own face at high speed. Jake's brain, still foggy from deep sleep, couldn't quite process what was happening. Where was the beach? Why was there a dog? Why did his stomach hurt so bad? Why was everything chaos? What is happening? Jake managed to yell, though it came out more like a strangled yelp, because Bella had knocked all the air out of his lungs when she landed on him. He tried to sit up, but Bella thought this was an invitation to play. She started licking his face with the enthusiasm of a dog who hadn't seen a human in years, even though Jake had literally given her dinner the night before. Her tail was wagging so hard it was hitting him in the arm repeatedly. Her paws were everywhere, stepping on his legs, his arms, his chest. It was like being attacked by the world's friendliest tornado. From somewhere in the room, Jake could hear laughing. Hysterical, can't breathe, doubled over laughing. He managed to turn his head, shielding his face from Bella's tongue assault, and saw Amy standing in the doorway. She had her phone out, clearly recording the entire disaster. Her face was red from laughing so hard, and she was trying to say something but couldn't get the words out. Jake tried to speak, but Bella chose that moment to step directly on his ribs, forcing out whatever air he'd managed to get back into his lungs. Bella, completely oblivious to the chaos she was causing, thought this was the best morning ever. She started running. Not running away or running to get something. Just running. In circles, on the bed. Her claws scrambled on the sheets as she zoomed from one end of the bed to the other, then back again. The sheets, which had been somewhat tangled around Jake already, now became a complete disaster. Bella's running wrapped them around Jake's legs, then his waist, then, somehow around his arms. Within 30 seconds, Jake was wrapped up like the world's most confused burrito, with a golden retriever still zooming around on top of him. "Amy!" Jake finally managed to shout. "Help! Call off your dog!" He was trying to sound upset, but even he had to admit this was kind of funny. Not funny, more like watching a comedy show where everything goes wrong funny. He struggled against the sheets, which only made them tighter. Bella, thinking the moving sheets were part of the game, grabbed a corner with her teeth and started pulling. Now Jake was being unwrapped and rewrapped at the same time. Amy finally managed to stop laughing long enough to put her phone down. Okay. Bella. Come here, girl," she called out, trying to sound authoritative but still giggling. Bella completely ignored her. The dog was having way too much fun to listen to commands. Amy walked over to the bed and tried to grab Bella's collar, but the dog was moving too fast. Every time Amy got close, Bella would zoom to the other side of the bed, tail wagging, tongue hanging out, having the absolute time of her life. Jake, still wrapped in sheets like some kind of Egyptian mummy, could only watch this comedy unfold. He'd given up trying to free himself. It was pointless. Every time he moved, Bella would pounce on whatever part of him moved, making everything worse. His hair was sticking up in every direction. One of his eyes was still half closed from sleep. He had dog slobber on his cheek. This was officially the worst and weirdest way he'd ever woken up in his entire life. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 5 minutes, Amy managed to corner Bella and grab her collar. She pulled the excited dog off the bed, even though Bella clearly wanted to continue playing with her new favorite toy, the Jake burrito. Amy dragged Bella toward the bedroom door, the dog's claws clicking on the floor as she tried to pull back toward the bed. "No more, Bella. You did your job, maybe a little too well." Amy got the dog out of the room and quickly closed the door before Bella could charge back in. The room fell silent, except for Jake's heavy breathing and the sound of Bella whining on the other side of the door, probably wondering why the fun had to end. Jake lay there, still tangled in sheets, staring at the ceiling. He blinked a few times, trying to make sense of what had just happened. His brain was awake now. Very awake, but still trying to catch up with reality. Did that really just happen? Did his girlfriend really just sick a dog on him while he was sleeping? Amy slowly walked back over to the bed, biting her lip, trying not to start laughing again. Jake was still lying there like a defeated caterpillar in a cocoon, one arm sticking out at an odd angle, his hair looking like he'd stuck his finger in an electrical socket. She sat down on the edge of the bed, carefully avoiding the wet spots where Bella had drooled. "So, good morning, sunshine. Did you sleep well?" She tried to sound innocent, but the grin on her face gave her away completely. Jake slowly turned his head to look at her. His expression was a mix of disbelief, annoyance, and something else. Was that the tiniest hint of a smile trying to break through? He opened his mouth to say something, then closed it, then opened it again. "I cannot believe you just did that. I literally cannot believe you actually did that." He started trying to unwrap himself from the sheet prison. Wiggling and rolling like a worm, Amy reached over to help him, pulling the sheets loose until he could finally sit up. He sat on the edge of the bed next to her, both of them silent for a moment. Jake's hair was still sticking up in every direction. He had sheet marks on his face. One of his socks had somehow come off during the chaos. He looked down at his hands, then at Amy, then back at his hands. "I was having a really nice dream about a beach," he said quietly. "There were no dogs on that beach. No dogs at all. It was a very peaceful, dog-free beach." Amy pressed her lips together, trying so hard not to laugh again. "I tried waking you up the normal way. I made noise. I cooked breakfast. I even stood there staring at you like a creep. You didn't move, not even a little bit. You were sleeping like you'd been knocked out. I had no choice but to bring in reinforcements." She pulled out her phone and showed him the video she'd recorded. "Look. I even got it on video. This is going to be legendary." Jake took the phone and watched the video. He saw himself sleeping peacefully one moment, then the door opening, then Bella's dramatic entrance. He watched his own face go from completely relaxed to absolutely terrified in half a second. He saw himself get wrapped up in sheets like a mummy. He saw the pure chaos of the whole situation. And despite wanting to be annoyed, despite wanting to be upset about his ruined sleep-in, he started to laugh. It started as a small chuckle, then grew into a full laugh. Because it was actually pretty hilarious. He looked ridiculous. The whole situation was completely absurd. "I look like I'm being attacked by a friendly monster," he said, replaying the video. "Look at my face right here. I had no idea what was happening. My brain was still at the beach and suddenly there's a dog." He handed the phone back to Amy, shaking his head. "You're lucky you're cute. You know that? Because this was evil, hilariously evil, but still evil." Amy grinned and leaned her head on his shoulder. "But it worked. Didn't it? You're awake now. Fully awake. No way you're falling back asleep after that." She looked up at him. "And come on, admit it. This is going to be a great story. Remember that time your girlfriend woke you up with a golden retriever? Classic. We'll be telling this story at parties for years." Jake couldn't argue with that logic. It was definitely a memorable morning. Even if it wasn't the peaceful sleep-in he'd been dreaming about for weeks. He put his arm around Amy and pulled her close. "Next time you want me to wake up early, just promise me one thing. Bring coffee first. Before the attack dog. Coffee. Then chaos. That's a reasonable order of operations. Deal." Amy laughed. "Coffee. Then chaos. I can work with that." She stood up and pulled him to his feet. "Now come on, Sleeping Beauty. I made pancakes like 2 hours ago, and they're probably cold now. We need to reheat them. And Bella probably needs to go outside before she destroys something out of excitement." They walked out of the bedroom together, and sure enough, Bella was waiting right outside the door. The moment she saw Jake, her tail started wagging again like she'd just won the lottery. Jake looked down at the dog, who was staring up at him with pure love and joy in her eyes. "You're a menace," he told Bella, but he bent down to scratch her ears anyway. "A cute menace, but still, a menace." Bella responded by licking his hand enthusiastically. In the kitchen, Amy reheated the pancakes, while Jake made fresh coffee. Bella sat under the table, tail still wagging, hoping someone would drop some food. Jake's phone, which he'd finally retrieved from the bedroom, started buzzing like crazy. Amy had already posted the video to their private friend group, and the responses were pouring in. Laughing emojis, crying laughing emojis, comments about how Jake's face was priceless, questions about whether Bella was available for hire as a personal alarm clock. Jake scrolled through the messages, shaking his head but smiling. I'm never going to live this down. Am I? Amy set a plate of warm pancakes in front of him and kissed the top of his messy head. Nope. Never. This is your legacy now, Jake. The guy who got defeated by a golden retriever before 8 in the morning. She sat down across from him with her own plate. But hey, at least you're up now. We have the whole day ahead of us. We could go to the park, go shopping, watch movies, whatever you want. Jake took a bite of pancake and thought about it. His perfect sleep-in plan had been completely destroyed. He'd been woken up in possibly the most chaotic way imaginable. His body was sore from being jumped on by a dog. He still had sheet marks on his face. But sitting here in the kitchen with Amy, eating pancakes, watching Bella beg for scraps, he realized something. Yeah, this wasn't the morning he'd planned. But it was pretty funny, and it was definitely memorable. Sometimes the best moments are the ones you don't plan for. Sometimes chaos is better than peace and quiet. He looked up at Amy, who was trying to sneak a piece of pancake to Bella when she thought he wasn't looking. Okay, I'll admit it. This was kind of funny. Kind of. I'm still traumatized, but it was funny. Amy's face lit up with a huge smile. See, I knew you'd come around. You just needed time to process the trauma. She raised her coffee mug. To unexpected mornings and attack dogs? Jake clinked his mug against hers. To unexpected mornings, but next Saturday, I'm locking the bedroom door and hiding Bella at someone else's house. They both laughed, and Bella barked from under the table, probably agreeing with the plan or maybe just asking for more pancakes. Jake never did get his peaceful sleep in that day. But years later, it would become one of his favorite stories to tell. The morning his girlfriend decided he'd slept enough and sent in the golden retriever. The morning that turned into a hilarious disaster but somehow ended up being perfect anyway.